Welcome to the Unmuted Podcast, where we talk about things faith, Jesus, life, and more. Joined by Leroy and Dallas. How you guys doing today, man? What's going on?
Good, man.
Chilling.
Good. So obviously,
Dallas is back with us. You see that? Yeah.
Yeah, Dallas might be a co. He's gonna be our co-host for a while. Given our last video, did it most on views. Even though we dug last week we dug deep on Nephilim, and this week I did want to switch it up, and maybe the next week we'll do some even wilder stuff. But I really wanted to talk about all of our testimonies and how we found Christ, and then I want to talk about kind of what people do wrong in regards to like their first 2 to 3 years of faith, and really kind of just breaking down that idea. So let's start with you, bro. How did you come to Christ?
Growing up, like, we always have that one person who always like has faith and everything. So like for me, probably my aunt. But I so when I was a kid, I was like, what, 4th grade, I got saved. But then like after a while, I just didn't care anymore. Like, I was just doing my own thing, right? A lot of things in Christianity just didn't make sense to me. I was questioning a lot. Wasn't really coming back with answers. So I was just like, you know what, this is for the birds, you know what I mean? Like, this is actually just like some made up stuff. And so it was about 4 years ago when it was just like, I looked in all these other religions, I looked in all this other stuff, I'd done my research and everything. I was pretty much just like, I wasn't so much anti-God, I was more like anti-Christianity. I just didn't like the rules and the regulations and like all this stuff, I just felt like there was a lot of stuff that was like swept under the rug kind of, and it was just like I just had to find peace with Christianity. Mm-hmm. and I hadn't found that yet. It was kind of like I just realized that I had just been like unnecessarily like stressing myself out, and it's just like, it was never the fact that I didn't believe in God, because I believed that, I didn't believe we just got here, I think that's like,
yeah. So basically, and tell me if I'm tracking right, were you like looking at other people's experiences, saying like, why isn't my experience like that? Like, were you comparing it to what other people have told you, and that was kind of is that why you were questioning so much?
Kind of, but also I'm just like, I'm not gonna take something somebody tells me at face value, That's the kind of way I like. If you're gonna tell me something, I'm gonna do my research on it, and then like get back to you on it. Like, I'm gonna believe something based off of research, not just of, this is what the Bible says, this is what I say, do this, and, you'll get saved, blah, blah, blah. And so doing the research on the Bible kind of led me, like, to a lot of different places, like a lot of different inclusive places. And it was just like, I just realized that, that the verse that sticks out to me the most is always are the ones that focus on faith,
Mm-hmm.
And I just had to, come to terms with that. Ever since then, I've been good,
Yeah. How about you, brother?
Yeah, man. So, I mean, I got saved when I was 12. I kind of grew up in a house where, when I was real young, my parents didn't go to church, but they started going to church partially when my mom got sick, and then also when my dad got sick. So they started going to church, all that, and my aunt at the time, she had asked us kids did we want to be in the choir, and we were like, sure, like whatever, let's try it, you know what I mean? So so we wound up going to church, being in the choir, all that stuff. And when you're in church, whether you want to listen or not, you wind up listening and hearing and all that, and find out who Jesus is, everything like that. So it was I was in church listening, and I knew who Jesus was because of all the conversations, but I had never accepted him. And it wasn't until after my dad passed away, when I was I was 12, and it wasn't until then when like I knew at that point I needed something else, because first of all I was going through a whole bunch of trauma, you know what I mean? So and one of our my mom's friends, she She was a minister because I grew up in Pentecostal church, so we had women ministers, and she was practicing her sermon, and then she asked me, because I was in there listening, and she was like, "Do you want to accept Christ?" And I was like, "Yeah," and I did. I accepted Christ. So, but like back to what you just said, like I accepted Christ. I was there for with him for like 6 months, and then after that 6 months, I was like, "All right, I'm done." Like I never really fully submitted the way I was supposed to. That came later on in life. That came after I stopped running from God and all that. So, yeah. What about you?
So mine was, I mean, got saved as a kid, pastor's kid, so obviously understood the gospel, understood that God existed. I believed in Jesus, just didn't want to follow him, wanted to do my own thing. Had a moment when I was like 18, I was at a Mighty Men of Valor conference, and it was the call to go into, like they said, if you feel a call into ministry, go up. And obviously I was going to school for journalism at that time, wanted to be a journalist, was inspired by like Clark Kent, Superman. So I was like, I want to do that. And so I ended up walking down that aisle, and then my life changed forever in that moment. I was always a follower. I was always a believer, but that moment made me a follower, because I didn't obviously go right into leadership after that, but it prepped my heart for what was going to come,
Yep.
And then right after that, we just went right into, just serving and singing, and started speaking at youth groups and all that stuff. And that's when, and then when I started feeling responsible for things, that's when I started to really take care of my soul and my heart, and reading my Bible more. I mean, I even knew the Bible growing up. So I mean, bro, I read the Bible every year since I've been like 13. Maybe since I was like 6. So I knew I know theology, just not the actual action. I didn't care to follow.
As a punishment, one time, my aunt, she took away like everything I had, bro, like all my toys and drawing and everything, and she gave me a Bible and was like, "Here, this is the only thing you're allowed to do." So I read that joint like frontwards, backwards, knew that joint inside out, like,
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think we all got a similar story as far as like being in the church and actually like listening to Bible stories, reading, having Sunday school classes and learning every Sunday school class verse and all this other stuff. Like like when you grow up in that, you know who God is. You might not know God, but you know who He is because you've been around it enough. And I think that that definitely, I tell people all the time, that definitely has played a part in my life.
Yeah.
Because even at the time when I didn't want to know God, I was around enough people that knew God to where it affected me. You know what I mean? So when I did get into the situations that I got into, I knew God was there, and I knew I could go back to Him.
Yeah.
One of my testimonies of me going back to Christ is when me and my wife was in a horrible relationship at the time, and I knew that the only way to fix it was to go to God, and she knew that too, and we made that decision that, hey, like, we know we can't fix it ourselves. So we got to go to God and see what He wants to do. And I mean, it's been crazy ever since we've done that. It's been nuts, man.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, and that's the thing. Like, for a lot of people, there's a coming to Jesus moment. Like for me, there's this girl that I was in love with at the time. I thought that was gonna be my wife. She ended up getting pregnant, and I was not the dad. So and that was kind of what kind of down spiraled me into, like, because I was kind of digging into pills for a little bit, to kind of cope with like some of the pain. And then I had that experience with Jesus that just changed my life forever. And that is the reality of faith, is that, like, I can't force you to become a Christian. Like, it either comes with, you have to have your own experience, and that might be from a intellectual standpoint, it might be from a spiritual standpoint. But we can't, like, and I feel like and this is a problem with a lot of my teenagers, that, like, they feel like I'm going to make them a Christian. Like, I don't make you anything, it's up to you to make that decision. Now let's dig a little bit deeper here, right? So when a lot of people make that decision to become a Christian, this is when I think a lot of mistakes are made down the road, and where I see a lot of my Christian friends that are just now saved, they dive down these two roads. Let's talk about the first road, which is legalism. Okay. Now, obviously, were any of you guys super, like, legalist when you first got saved, or no?
No, I mean,
or have you guys had a season of where you were super, like?
I mean, I went to like a legalist school. I mean,
yeah.
So definitely, I know the experience. I've never personally, like, I've always disagreed with it.
Yeah. Well.
yeah. No, I agree. I haven't. I don't like legalism personally.
Well, do you have like Okay. Cool.
I mean,
I've definitely had big experiences with it.
okay, but
Yeah.
you had experience with it, right?
I've had friends and people that have been down that road that I've actually been next to them with when they've been going down that road,
Yeah.
things
Yeah.
like that. And I think to some extent, I don't think it's necessarily legalism, but when I first got saved, and this is what I tell people all the time, you gotta like really lock in. Like for me, and I think I told you before, like for me with certain things, I had to like go fully in on them. Otherwise,
You would have folded.
I would have folded. Yeah, exactly, 100%. Because of my background, just because of, you know what I mean. We talked about like music and all that. When
Yeah,
it's
how
a
you had to
rap.
switch out all the
Yeah, I had to
music, yeah.
change all my music because, bro, if I would have listened to that stuff that I was listening to, I would have been a back and forth the whole time. Like, you know what I mean. So things like that, I had to change to make sure. But I wasn't really on a legalism time, if that makes sense. So
Yeah, exactly. So a lot of Christians do go down the legalist route, and it can maybe be because they were into something that was super hardcore, like Pastor Ron's brother, like for a prime example. He told me that his brother was so into the world that he's just straight. There's no gray, and for a lot of people that does work, right? But there are a lot of Christians that can't handle the legalist lifestyle, and because they're so tripping about it, they try to force it on other people.
I think it affects like the kids. Like a lot of like when a parent gets saved and they go down that legalist lifestyle.
Yeah.
I think oftentimes I've seen it affect the kids negatively.
because kids think, oh, like, so that's the idea of like who God is. There's
Yeah.
no type
Yeah.
of training. But I wanted to ask the question of like, why do you guys think that a lot of Christians, when they first get saved, they go through this legalist route? You know what I mean? And when I say legalist, like, I'm like, I think legalism is bad, but I do think there's some areas of our life where it's where it's useful and needed. So like for me, right? Like I was into pornography a lot. And so the one thing that me and my friend did, we I forget the name of it, but it was this little blocker that you can have on your phone that will basically block off any pornography on your phone. And some of my friends called me a legalist for it, but I was like, but I needed that barrier,
Yep.
to stop me from doing it. So like, where do you guys lie with some of the positives of kind of tightening up in some areas, and where you guys see kind of like the abuse of it as well? You know what I mean? I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
I think legalism, a lot of times I've seen, like leaks into like politics, sort of. Like it just becomes like a constant battle between like leadership and oftentimes the younger generation growing up underneath it, under it. The school I went to, they have a church attached to it, and they're very legalistic. Women gotta wear skirts, kind of thing. They have a lot of rules like that, and it's just like I see the clash between the older generation, the people in leadership, which is oftentimes the older generation, and the younger generation coming up under them. It's just like, what is this? Like, they're like growing and evolving with as time goes on. And they kind of want to see that in leadership, and I see and it's just like a constant clash that goes back and forth,
Yeah.
yeah, I think that can definitely be part of it. But I also think what you said earlier with like knowing yourself and knowing like what you can and can't handle, because I do think there's times when for certain people there are certain things that they have to be strict on because it's affecting their walk. You know what I mean? We got some people, and I've told people this before, like certain people, I'll tell them like, hey, yo, you need to make sure you put in this blocker here or tighten it up here because you're falling right now. You know what I mean? So if you need to tighten up to that point, you should. That's why, like I said, I don't necessarily like legalism, but I do like rules. I do like people actually knowing their restrictions and knowing, what their boundaries are, because we all gotta answer to God in our own way. You know what I mean? So,
exactly.
But with legalism, when you make it so strict, like women skirts and all this other stuff, like then you can hinder somebody, because somebody can be like, well, if I gotta follow God with all these rules to the T like this, like why would I want to? Where's my freedom at in that? How can I have an actual relationship with Him? So, you know what I mean?
Well, I think one thing with legalism, is that they focus more on the sin of other people
Yep.
and less on like the sin in your own personal life. So like you need to wear skirts to basically like block off the idea or thoughts of sexual immorality in myself.
Mm-hmm.
Where it's just like instead of focusing on your own personal walk, you shouldn't where like you're thinking these things, you instead like put your own like walk or like desires or things that you're struggling with on another person by stopping what they're doing.
Yep.
And it's like that may not be their struggle, that's your struggle. You need to focus on that for yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that is why like I'm all for self-control. Self-control taking to another level is legalism. You know what I'm saying? Because a lot of people do have sins, as you said, a lot of people have sins that they're going through, but then they push them onto other people.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? And what happens is like it's like someone like me who struggled with sexual sin, and to this day still struggles with lust. I mean that is one of the strongest urges that I have to fight every single day, and not just lust for females, lust for money, lust for success, lust for ego.
You caught me so off guard there. I was like, wait, what? You're like, not just for females? I was like, okay.
Oh no, yeah, whoa, no, I don't swing the other way, brother. Calm down. I'm talking about like,
Okay, Buster.
I'm talking about like tangible things
Nah,
like
you
money,
tell- yeah.
yeah, success,
It's a good thing you
yeah,
explained that.
Yeah.
I love my wife. I'm happily married. You know what I'm saying?
Oh man.
You know what I mean? I got
He said-
friends
he
that
said,
they're
"Hold
dudes,
on."
but that's where it stops. All right, the buck stops there. Thank you for the clarification.
I agree though. I listen.
Yeah.
You're right, and I think now for me, back to what you just talked about your struggle with that. I was fortunate enough to where that was one thing God took away from me immediately. It was the only thing He immediately took away was my I had the same thing. I had an addiction, and God took it away.
Yeah.
And I didn't really have to worry about it after that. Now there's other things that I had to pray about because I struggle with those things worse. And God didn't take them away like that. So, but yeah, like knowing yourself, like we talked about, and understanding that you can fall into this with anything. You can fall into that with, like you said, money, pride, any of that.
Exactly.
So
exactly, and when you struggle with sins like that, it makes you tighten up so hard. I mean, and one of the biggest lessons I learned was like teaching people that like there might be a time where you might have to tighten up super hard, but also, I come up in another era because like, and I was talking to one of the older guys about this at church not too long ago, saying how like I can walk at a beach and see a girl in a bikini with their cheeks out, and it won't even faze me. Because that's the era that I came up in. You know what I'm saying? And like, so there's different triggers for me that what an older guy will have because they come from a time of modesty, back in the day. But I want to talk about the next what? A dude that grew up in the 60s and 70s, bro, they're like the outfits were very
they wore
modest.
they wore
You know what I'm
like
saying? And those are the people
bright,
that I'm talking
bright
about.
outfits.
Yeah, I'm talking about people that like wore
covered
like,
all the way up and all that.
their dresses weren't tight, like super light. But like for us, women wear tight stuff all the time and it doesn't faze me. You know what I'm saying? Now I do want to talk about the next crutch.
It's funny because you'll notice like I find for myself, I'll notice a female more if she wears like something like loose fitting or modest. I'll be like, wait, like it's kind of like more shocking than if I see somebody like.
Yeah, exactly.
I agree.
And that's why we have the new quote, modest is the hottest. You know what I'm saying? Because every female wears tight clothes.
In my life,
I just made that up.
Where'd you?
I
I was
was
saying
gonna say
right
that
now.
I just made that up.
I was like, whoa.
Hey, not bad.
Just made that up. And we're
It's
gonna,
actually- that might actually go.
yeah,
that might
modest
go
is the
low
hottest. Hashtag. But I want to talk about the next crutch, which is not knowing, which is being ignorant. Because when a lot of Christians do get saved, they want to run out and start yapping without knowing all of the information.
Bro.
That happens all the time.
And they all, right. And the thing is like they don't know any information
at all.
So I do want to blame biblical teachers for a second, because I do think that what happens with a lot of Christians is that they get saved to situations. And when I say that is that a pastor will talk about a situation, right, that they're going through, which I think that is biblical. Jesus did that. People get saved. Okay. Because look, Pastor Ron, you, me, whoever spoke to their situation, right? They like God spoke through Pastor Ron, whoever, to them. They get saved. And what ends up happening is that this person that gets saved, they don't necessarily want to go and learn about the gospel, about the Bible, and about what they're actually following. But now they want to speak to everybody's situations.
Yes.
And what happens is this Christian goes from a topical Christian, which I have nothing against, but they don't know the actual theology and the Bible. So would love to hear you guys' thoughts on that, about like why, or about where kind of like we as teachers do fumble that, but also like, you know, why is it that a lot of Christians' first instinct isn't to go and learn about the actual idea of the gospel, like in more of a grander scale, and learn and actually have the hunger to read the Bible, but they're quicker to go on the internet and debate politics from a Christian perspective, or you know, or they're able to talk about, you know, some of these social issues.
That's not even a Christian thing. That's just a people thing. Like, people are fine with being ignorant, not knowing things. Like, that's like you said. Why are Christians quick to do this, not learn or not delve deep into the topics that they're interested in? That's just humanity. So many people are like willing to just get up, you know, go on Instagram, you know, go on X and be like, and spout off this like nonsense without having any like factual background, not knowing anything about the topic that they're talking about, but they're willing to spout it off because they can, you know. And I think that like Christians, we gotta like distance ourselves from that culture of just spouting to a culture of like learning and, you know, growing ourselves in order to talk about the topics that we want to talk about in an educated and like, you know, in an educated fashion, you know.
Yeah, I think some people, though, I think a lot of times it's not even that they are not necessarily reading anything, or like what I found is a lot of people start reading the Bible and then they get this conviction that they need to tell the world, or they need to tell everybody about it, and which is great, because at the end of the day, we're called to do that. We're called to, you know, share our story, share the gospel, so that people can come to Him. But like you said, you gotta actually know fully what you're talking about before you go out there and do that, especially on the internet. Because anything you say, man, one time I was on a forum, right, and I was a little seasoned in my Christianity, but I was on a forum, and it was a forum where it was a liberal forum. I'll just say that. And I said something about the Bible, right? And I said something about, you know, God's word and and it took off, man. People were so mad that I said what I said, because I was just saying it from a biblical standpoint. But the problem is at that point, me making people mad turned some people away. You know what I mean? Even though I could have been factually right, but you gotta know, like, when you're sharing stuff, who you're sharing it with, and if the fruit is ripe.
Yeah,
that's a good point.
And this is the reality, right? A lot of people don't have social skills
at all,
and you can see when someone has bad social skills when they gain knowledge. Like, someone getting knowledge will really show you, are they actually, do they touch grass? Do they actually talk to people? Are they actually social? And one of the things about Christianity is that when you learn about Christianity, you can feel that you have a intellectual edge over people, you know? But the reality is, you don't actually have an edge. You become an intellectual inferior because you think that you're better than everyone, and you know, and you go out and you argue. And look, him and I differ on this. I think I have no problems with having civil debates and convos, because I have Muslim friends that hit me up, and you know, they ask me questions about, you know, God, and then I'm asking questions about like Allah, and we're just going back and forth. I'm not really trying to waste time to disprove.
I think that's fine, yeah.
Because they know how I feel, like, and I know how they feel, but like, we're always swapping information, because you know, I think that we need to know what's going on in Islam and Buddhism and all these different, you know, religions, because as Christians, when people come into our house and they come from following these things, we should have a grounding, or we should know at least a little bit. Yeah, but I think the political climate has changed that, because one of my issues is that what scares me is when people are coming to Christ via a political run, not necessarily the church or the body of Christ is out helping people. And so what happens is like people's faith isn't tied to scriptures, it's tied to laws. And I know a lot of Christians that are tied to where their Christianity lies in a law, not necessarily the faith, you know? And so that's where my kind of fear is with like a lot of new Christians and gaining new info is like, are you just using this info to push in arguments or like kind of like, or like what the Bible says, is this stuff actually storing in your heart?
Well, that's like for a lot of like older Christians. What about like for younger? What do you think the hold up for younger Christians is?
I think that I would say if are we talking like youth group kids or like or like young adults?
Kind of young adults.
I think that the thing with young adults is I think that we are kind of in a mix because like you have our parents that are feeding us bull jive. So like an example, and I'm gonna shoot straight. Like an example would be like a lot of people told me that I was getting married too early and that I should focus on my career, you know? And these are people that have been married for like 20, 30 years, 40 years, 50 years, you know? And I even had a lot of people.
Do you think that is like, do you think they were, like, obviously they care about you, so like they probably felt like, and I'll just say it, like marriage is hard. you know that. So I think sometimes people, because I'm a millennial, so I'm, you know what I mean, whatever. I think you're a millennial too, right?
No,
you're Gen Z anyway. So, you know, I'm 40. So I think differently than you think. You know what I mean? Because of my age and my experience, like the things that I know now after 15 years of marriage versus what you know at 5 years, right? 4 years?
4 years, yep.
4 years.
Yeah.
I can see why somebody might say, hey, you might want to, you know, now, I mean, like I said already, my marriage is great and that I'm wonderful, all that. But at the same, but like, it took a lot of work.
Yeah.
So I think if I knew some of the stuff, then I would have addressed it and approached it in a different way.
Yeah.
I don't regret nothing, but at the same time, if I had more knowledge, and more, I would have looked at it differently. So I think it could be a good intention rather than.
I think it's more so that Gen Z has more of a boomer mindset than a lot of millennials. And when I say that, it's like
that's true.
I know more than 20 married couples that got married in less than a year, engaged and married, dated, engaged and married. You know, and because we move very fast, and in my generation we just move fast. I think that a lot of people my age, they listen to a lot of these older people that tell us to slow down. And like I do think some of that is right. But I think a lot of people our age, they don't know how to think for themselves. So like they listen. So like, cause like the way that I live, I value what my mom and dad says, but I make my own decision at the end of the day. You know, and like when I look at some of these, you know, and like when I was in the dating pool, right, and I was taking girls out to eat and hearing stuff. One of the biggest turnoffs was that you don't think for yourself. Your mother makes all of your decisions, and you're 22 years, or I got married at 22, but and you're 19, you know, years old. So I think the biggest crutch for us, bro, is the ability to think for ourselves, and we use the internet, and we use other people to actually mimic our thoughts.
So, what would your advice be for marriage?
For getting married?
Yeah, would you advise a short time or would you advise a longer time? From what you did?
I think what I did was smart because...
Of course you do.
Yeah, it works, right? But I mean, I waited 6 months, you know, and I always say, like, you should know after 3 months if someone's, like, the one or not. Like, it shouldn't take that long. And then, you know, But also,
but you knew her before that, right, too?
Yeah, but I didn't really know her much, though. You know what I mean? And plus... I had other goals. Let's keep it at that when we first met. young high school Stevie, you know what I'm saying? But things did have to line up to work. You know, like things like, and that is the thing about marriage, that you have to make things line up. Because like I was just talking to one of my friends where he got engaged, but he's waiting a year, you know, and they live in the same duplex, but not the same house, you know, so they're kind of doing life together, but from like, you know, separate there's places. Different situations for each person. But I think that the time frame that I did is smart, you know, but I do have friends that they are taking their time. They are waiting a year, to get married, but that's just not me. I'm a man of action. I'm a man, like, when I want something, I'm going to get it. So for me, getting married fast was just fit for me because I'm not a patient person. And I didn't want to mess up. You know what I mean?
And I think you did say something important. I think, like you said, just because, like, Gen Z, you guys have so much more at your fingertips and you moving at such a faster speed than we had to. I mean, we talked about this the other day. Me and my wife were talking about how, like, for us, being outside, coming in when the streetlights came on was a win. You know what I mean? Nowadays, like, kids don't want to go outside. They got everything at their fingertips. Even if they do go outside, like, it's not the same. You can't be out like you used to be and, and all that. And depending on where you're living at, like, all these things matter more, and you don't get the experience of, like you said, touching grass as much as we did, because everything we did, we had to actually physically go out there and do it. Whereas nowadays, a lot of things are done on technology, computers, and no knock to that at all. But it's just a different speed, mindset, all that.
Yeah, it's different, bro. It's different.
A lot of people my age are kind of just like, I don't know. They're kind of just not smart.
No,
like really, like they're just like, have you never, like, a lot of them, I just feel like, have you ever had an actual conversation with somebody?
Yeah.
Because, like, you just sound ignorant to me. Like, I just don't have the patience to, like, have conversations with people.
And that's one of the issues with a lot of young people our age coming to the faith, is that, like, they have this ego, like I was really on a Bible study call with this kid, and he's trying to get into podcasting. I don't think he's made a podcast yet, but, like, I'm talking to him and I'm like, and he's literally, I mean, with full confidence, he's telling me just wild theology, and I'm like, yeah, we gotta correct that. You know what I'm saying?
Actual, like,
and when I got saved, like, I was moving with way more humility. I was moving with way more like, yo, like, is this right? Is this wrong? I need help here. Really trying to ask for help. So
yeah, I think
it's really a double-edged sword. Like, you're either ignorant and don't know the information, or you know the information but the wrong context and perspective.
I was gonna say, I think even with you in the last year, like, we've talked about this, like, just your growth in the last year has been crazy, because, like, of course you're smart, you do all that stuff, the Bible real well and everything like that, but actually taking that and moving from, a young man, young adult, firecracker, to starting to mature to the level that you're maturing at. Like, you asked Ron questions, you asked me questions, like, me and you sat down, we've been accountability partners, things like that matters. And I think people miss that nowadays. So, like, you got to have people that are around you that wants you to thrive just as much as you want to thrive too, so
for sure.
But you got to be willing to be teachable, because a lot of, like you said, a lot of people are so cocky that they don't want to be teachable.
Exactly.
So I think a lot of people, like, in my generation, they use Christianity as kind of like a look, kind of. I see it so many times, especially when they're trying to, like, date, trying to get into the the dating field, kind of. They'll be like, they'll start posting a bunch of Christianity stuff on their story.
Yeah.
And it's like, that's kind of like a crutch, kind of, so to speak. And it's kind of like, wow.
I do think some of the positives, though, bro, is that there's a lot of people that I know a lot of people that have no aspirations for leadership, but just want to follow Christ. And where I see the future going, per se, is I don't think there's going to be a lot of pastors in the next 20 years. I see, like when I look at a lot of my friends that, they know a lot about, they're reading Catholic Bibles, they're reading every version of the Bible, you know what I mean? And they have no aspirations for leadership. Like, they just want to be the best husband, the best worker that they could be. And I think that as Christians, like, I think that's what we need more of. Because I think that with the millennial generation and my dad's, they were all obsessed with titles. They were all obsessed with being a pastor. But we need more men where they don't care if they're a pastor or not, but they just want to be good mentors to young men.
So and you think Christianity is more like centralized, kind of, so to speak?
What does that mean when we say centralized, brother?
More like home-centered. It revolves around your personal growth, the growth of your home, the health of your home, the health of your job, and it kind of grows out from there.
That's the early church. That's how they did it.
Exactly, and that's where I think it's going. Like, even when I look at how like the movement of the gym is like the best it's ever been. There's so many people our age that are eating healthy. You know what I mean? That are working out every day. Like my friend Denzel. That boy reads his Bible every single day. He works out every single. He eats healthy every single day. You know, and we need more men like that. Even Austin, like Austin, who was a cursor, like cussing Christian. This dude doesn't even curse no more. You know, but
that was the thing that I had to work on. That was the thing that I actually had to stop, like without like God just taking it away. Like I had to actually literally pray on it every single day. Like I had to meditate on the word. Like that was the biggest thing that I did was cuss and
exactly right
and use the N-word.
But
so
yeah, but look right, but look right, and I still say the word too much. I gotta stop. But anyways, but because of that, right, he applied that same discipline to his faith, and you know he's better. So that's where I think the future is going for us. To where like. As I think the pastor pool is going to be a lot shorter, and I think there's not going to be many churches because like I feel like we have a lot of churches right now, but a lot of the churches aren't healthy. You know what I'm saying? And I think we're going to be having some really good, healthy churches in the next few years.
I see a lot of churches dying out because they just can't reach.
There's a lot growing too, though. I mean, not growing. There's a lot that's growing too. So
yeah, there's some churches.
I think you said something important though. I mean, just look at your boy, our boy, you know, Philip Mitchell, and just how he, like, I think people are so much on the truth right now that's the next movement. I think people are so much on, they want real Bible, they want real life experiences, they want authenticity so much that is the movement. And I think it's what you said, though. It goes into people doing that individually in their homes, you know, doing that wherever they're at, and just making that the highest level for them, because they don't necessarily need a position. They just want to live the best life they can for Christ.
And that's been my leadership lately here at First Baptist of saying like I think about some of the guys here, and I'm like God's okay with them not everybody has to become a deacon.
Yeah.
Not everybody has to become a pastor.
Yeah.
Not everybody has to be a leader of a small group leader. So like we have some guys, bro, they might be on the cleanup crew and that's all they want to do. Some people might want to fill the baptism pool. Hey, if you want to do that, sign up now. But like that might be all what they want to do, and God's okay with that. And I think that's where our Gen Z movement is going, versus where I feel like where my dad grew up and where maybe even a generation before him grew up is like, if you aren't a pastor, deacon, missionary, evangelist,
yeah, you got titles,
then you're doing something wrong.
Yeah.
You know. And
but how do you differentiate, you know, where you think somebody should go as in leadership, right? Me and you are in leadership. We pastors. It's our job to see God moving in certain people's life and saying, hey, you know, we see this call on you, or we see this, you know what I mean? Now, if God's not telling you that he has that call on you, that's one thing. But if we say we see this call on you, like, what's your next step? Like, or do you just say, let that person, you don't say nothing to that person? Like,
you have to want to do it.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Yeah, you have to want to do it. Like, yes, I ran from God, but when the call came, I wanted it. You know what I mean? Like, that a part of you has to want to, because if you don't want it, which sounds crazy, it sounds very egotistical, but like you got to want to do it, or it's not going to.
I agree. When God called me, and we talked about it too, when God called me, at the time, I didn't necessarily.
Yeah.
It wasn't that I didn't want the call, but I was shocked that he was calling me.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And not only that, I was like, and I know you felt like this too. Like, are you really calling me? Like, am I really called to this?
I still question that to this day.
Like, yeah. Why would you call me?
Yeah.
Like,
Dude, I look at this and I struggle with. I'm like, God, why am I really? But
I think it's interesting because like I don't know if you two have ever been this way. Like as a kid, like always been outspoken. Always had my own point of view of things. Always never been afraid to say that. And, you know, when I was younger, it got me into a lot of trouble, you know. But the older I got, the more, you know, the more people. So I've always been told,
the only one, brother.
You need to be in, like, you should be in leadership. Like, that when I was at Fairwinds, the head pastor there was like, hey, you're going to become a pastor when you get older. I'm just like, oh, please, no. Like, I want to make money, you know. But, like.
You can do both.
Hey, mega church, you know what I mean? But like,
this guy,
it's just like And a lot of times I felt like that was like pushing me away from like, because I was like, you know, that whole Allen Iverson, like when he was in that press conference and they were like, he was like, and they were like, you know, how are you, like, people were talking how you're like a bad role model for the kids. And he was like, I don't want to be a role model. Like, I just want to play basketball. Like, I kind of felt like the same way. I was like, I don't want to be a leader. I don't want to be a pastor. Like, I just want to, like, I just want to do my thing. Like, leave me alone kind of thing. Like, and it kind of pushed me, like, away more than, like, when I came here, it's kind of like, you know, Stevie, is kind of like my mentor. And it's kind of like, it's a lot easier to, like, come to terms with, like, certain things than when people were just like, this is what you need to do, this is what's gonna happen. Where it's like, I haven't felt that yet. Like, I haven't seen that yet. So, like, what are you seeing that I'm not?
And it's also because we're doing life together.
Yeah.
You're joining me. Like, and like, for me, like, when I was in your spot, J3 was that guy for me. You know what I mean? Like, where there was a season where I didn't have I had the time to kind of like just be around. So I hung out with J3 every day. The same way you and I hang out every day.
Yep.
Like that was my journey. Like J3 helped kind of paying the course for me for what I'm doing now. You know what I mean? And without him, I wouldn't be here. You know what I'm saying? So that's a use. But
for me, it was you know, I was in a small group and I had 2 mentors and like just them entrusting in me, not even leadership part, because that came too, but it was more like you said, it was more like being around them, learning from them, seeing what they're doing, seeing the men that they are. I mean, John Taylor was the chairman of Deacons at the time here, and he was my closest guy. Like, he literally took me under his wing, taught me everything, things like that. And then I had Mark Unruh, who was my mentor too, you know, Upward, all that. And having both of them men in my life, like, and they not putting no pressure on me. They literally I'm just hanging with them. I'm just, you know, being, that was what you said. It's like, now you learn and you know that God has been called you for this. You just didn't know it was like that until you start hanging around these people that are those type of men and they're pouring into you and telling you, you know, whatever. And it's not even about what they're telling you, but it's about them affirming what God has already put in you, you know, so.
Yeah.
Sorry, Steve, go ahead.
Kind of a side note. What do y'all think of Sunday school? What were your experiences with it?
It
had its good parts and bad parts.
Well, I'll say this, like, as a kid, it helped me learn the Bible, man.
Yeah.
It did.
Yeah.
It did. But I'm not a guy who thinks it has to be there, you know. Because to me, small groups has become the new Sunday school. You know what I mean? So, like, I think small groups is just a new form of it. It's just on, like, another day.
Yeah.
You know?
I agree. I think you gotta have something like that. I mean, one of my, you know, I run the Wolfpack, so of course I'm biased to this. But you gotta have other brothers and other, you know, people around you that can help build you up and can help you grow. Like, even as a kid, I was gonna say that. Even as a kid, like, you gotta have other people around you, like leaders and teachers that can instill those little Bible verses that. Because we just talked about it. Like, when I was younger, like, I had been in church so much, done Sunday school, all these other things, to where when the time came and I had the pressure, I knew I had the word in me, whether I wanted it or not. It was there. You know what I mean? So it shaped my future. Because if I didn't know nothing, I couldn't have been able to go back to that to say, oh, well, there is a God that I need that can help me in this situation. You know what I mean? Or just help me in general so I can be a better person. You know? So.
Interesting.
Yeah, I think growing up, right, it's all memorization. You know, like when I was on Punishment, that's how I read all the Percy Jackson books, all the Diary of a what was it? Diary of a Wimpy Kid books. You know, I started reading. I read the Odyssey. What is a 13-year-old reading the Odyssey for?
I was reading Odyssey. Yeah,
I was reading freaking. I mean, we can go down the list of books I read. I read all of the Aragon books. I read, you know what I mean, and then I tried to read Game of Thrones and got it confiscated because the book was too mature for a 12-year-old or for a 13-year-old. But anyways, I would never forget, my mom got me, I had this little box and it was all Bible cards like this big, and on each Bible card it told me a story of each Bible character. And when I was on Punishment, I would just read them over and over because I had nothing else to do, bro.
Yeah.
And I think that from an intellectual standpoint, I think it's good because when you get older, it kind of helps becoming a serious Christian way easier. Because if I already know like the stories and I already know the idea of God, if I understand that, then it helps my focus on action way better. So that's where I think that like children's ministry is good, but I think the problem is a lot of children's ministries in general, not necessarily
I just felt always super disassociated from it.
But that's
As
why
a kid, like it was just like I already knew the Bible and everything. So when they were teaching these things, it was kind of like,
and
why am
that's
I here?
and that's
My kids fell into that recently too because
Yeah.
they know the Bible so much that it, like,
it's so childish.
yeah,
to me.
they
It's
feel
like,
like it's like baby.
we do all these skits, and a lot of times there's a lot of competitions too, and it's just like it's so competitive. You know, we play these games. Who can read the Bible verse faster? Blah blah blah.
Yeah,
blah.
but
it's kind of like.
Sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, go ahead.
It's just I don't know. It just never really did anything for me, you know.
Yeah, and that's why I like Millie's approach. And this is not a shameless plug, but Millie, like Millie's approach to kids men is more expression than information.
Yep.
You know what I mean? And I think that for kids, and I pray that my son takes heed of this, is that I want him to be able to express the gospel and to express how he feels, and I want him to be able to express what's going through his mind and heart, rather than memorize a freaking Bible verse and have no emotion attached to it.
Yep.
You know what I mean? Like for me, I needed that information because I was already an expressive person by nature. I went to Cab Calloway. You know what I mean? So I didn't need that. But I think for a lot of kids these days, like they have a lot of emotions that they don't know like what to put on. And so someone like Millie, who's very spiritually like tied to those things, because that's how she's an expressive person. When you do that with kids, it brings them up a different way. So they're not just learning information, but their relationship with God is tied to their expression.
Yep.
Well, it's funny because we had that situation not too long ago. It was like at the last lock-in, where it was like the two kids got in a fight, and we asked the one kid, he's like, well, "Why'd you hit the other kid?" And he was like, "I don't know, I just felt like it." It's like, what? Like, what is actually wrong with you? Like, I've never swung with somebody just because I felt like it. Like that's actually insane to me.
Yeah.
But it's just like they just don't know like what they're doing while they're doing it. And it's kinda
Exactly. Exactly. And so great stuff. And then I want to get to the last piece of why a lot of younger Christians and believers, not in age, but as in years of following, why it's so hard for them. So we talked about ignorance, obviously.
You said what?
I said we talked about ignorance.
Oh yeah.
We talked about legalism. And now for the last one, I really want to talk about the understanding of authority. Because I do think that there's a lot of churches that abuse their authority on new, followers of Jesus. And so these new followers are building expectations that can't be met. You know what I mean? And some of these leaders are like abusing their power. And then there's the other side of the spectrum where leaders are trying to hold people like accountable, but they don't want to be held accountable. You know what I'm saying? So I want to first speak to leaders abusing, because I do think that is a big thing to where leaders do abuse.
Yeah.
And not necessarily, and I really don't want to talk about like the more of the sexual stuff, because we can all say that's wrong, right? I'm kidding. But no, it's not wrong, right? Like, we could all say that that's wrong, but I want to talk about more so like I've heard some things where pastors are saying like if you date a guy, you need to call me and tell me who he like that type of stuff.
Think about the Marvin Sapp thing that happened recently. Do you think that was him abusing his power?
100%.
Like I think that I take that as a great example. Like I'm sorry, if a pastor is gonna lock the door and tell me I can't leave until I pay him. Like,
Mind
are you kidding me?
And mind you, he asked for $40,000. Mind you, he was wearing a $44,000 Rolex on his wrist.
Was he really? Yeah, take that Rolex off your wrist, put it in the John, and you can sell it later on. But like, you're gonna tell me that I can't leave a building until I pay you?
Yeah.
Like, what are you, a tax collector? Like, what is this?
Yeah, and on the tiny desk, did you see he did that? He did NPR's tiny desk. He had on a Louis shirt with the $100,000 Patek watch, and it's like. And it's like when you do stuff like that, that's when people start to question you and your pockets. Like if you're really the leader of the church, as you said, take off that watch. Say, yo, this is me sacrificing something that means dear to me, and I'm giving that to Jesus. That would have been way more important than trying to lock, the doors to get people to give. But I think giving in general is just such a sensitive topic.
And I think even the deacons, he was like, "Deacon, close the door," and he kept saying,
The ushers,
the ushers closed the door. He kept saying it, and the ushers were like, "Wait, what?"
They were uncomfortable. They were like, "Oh, what?"
Because like,
That's
you're locking me in the building.
That's craziness. Yeah.
Like, I'm like, he's so fortunate that people didn't get up and like
punch him in the face.
start something start something with the ushers or whatever. Because it's like, are you kidding me? Like, I don't know how I would react personally. But I just know like
That's a hard topic, bro. Cause listen, man.
It's a power trip, bro.
and a lot of
pastors have
I've
it.
been in churches where they've done that, and it's like it's a very Pentecostal thing. It's like we ain't leaving until we get everything that we need for offering.
So
I've been in a service like that before too. Well, they ain't locked the door because they ain't that stupid. But
No, for real.
Yeah.
They lock the door. They just close it. Like,
Yeah.
people aren't leaving.
Yeah.
And you kind of feel the pressure if you get up
yeah,
and go.
they make that little like you said, that little pressure term or whatever.
Yeah.
Or I mean, I've even grew up, and I agree with you. I even grew up where like certain pastors want everybody to fall out and all this other stuff, and to me
not
that's another form of like
Touching pressure points and stuff.
Yeah, man,
Like,
nah,
you don't
listen.
even know, like you're not a doctor.
Yeah.
But you're trying to touch my pressure point to get me to fall out. Are you kidding me?
yeah,
Yeah.
So I
You hurt
agree.
me, I'm suing you. Like,
yeah. Question is though, is like, why do pastors power trip so much? And why is it that, you know, when they see a new believer, they look at them like fodder, you know, and they try to get everything that they can out of them.
I think that's just human condition. I mean,
I think go ahead.
once you give
I
a
need a
person
better
a certain
answer.
amount of anything, like a certain amount of power, it's just like you've given it to them. Now you gotta like live with the consequences. I mean, that's why you gotta choose good leaders, you know. And it's kind of like there's always a danger to leadership of getting it, like, you know, if it going to your head. And it's kind of like, yeah, it's just I just think it's human condition, you know.
Yeah. I think I don't necessarily think it's necessarily a power trip. I think it's more of, like you said, it's a control thing, and just people wanting to set whatever they want to set to get this person conditioned to whatever that church is doing or however they're moving. You know what I mean? Just that initial. And some people are on power trip. Some people are on. They need to have that much control, so much so that they're gonna do whatever they can to make sure that they have that control. And I mean, as a leader, for me, like I only want to do what I feel like God is telling me to do with a person, as far as pouring into them. But that's me. You know what I mean? I'm not everybody else. And
Do you trust your leaders, or did you? Well, you're a leader now, but even still, like, do you find it easy to trust people in leadership? In general,
Definitely not.
Even
that is
Definitely not.
That is a loaded question, because
Definitely
I've
not.
dealt with bad leadership personally. I've dealt with leadership that hasn't had the best interests of me and other people.
We talked about the other day.
So even listen.
no names, but I mean,
I'll even tell you. So before I was about to become a deacon, I had been voted by a whole list of other deacons, and because of the leadership at the time, the people at the top, they didn't want me to be in the leadership, so they literally blocked it. And I knew about it. Everybody told me about it. So trusting your leadership at that point, yeah, it kind of goes out the window to a certain extent. But you got to be content in what you know God is calling you to do, and be content with His timing on for you to do leadership, or to whatever the case may be. Yeah, I've been there. Where,
I mean, similar thing happened to me, but I left.
Yeah.
I wasn't dealing with it. You know what I'm saying? And that was kind of my mama thing, because I left. Well, it was that, but also like the pastor at the time started getting like super political, so I dipped. Jack, wait, calling you out there. I don't care. Yeah, Pastor Jack started politics from the pulpit, and I'm not doing it. And that will stay on this podcast. We got to call that out. But yeah, bro. I also think this too. I think a lot of pastors, they get treated like royalty, and like back in the day, in some of the churches that I grew up in, like Alpha Worship Center, they treated the pastor like a king. So like after he preached, and I only saw this because my dad would preach and they would do this. He would get fed fruits and cheeses, and
Are you kidding me?
He would have security when he's walking to the freaking to the front. You know, and he always comes in at the last song, hugs everybody. They were wearing gold robes. Dude wore gold robes, purple robes.
Are you being serious?
With
Are you
like $10,000 rings. I'm dead serious, bro. I'm
no.
so serious.
Man.
Yeah, they were. I mean, he wore gold robes. Like you know how them pastors wear them robes. Gold tunic robes, you know, and purple with gold tunic robes, and black with gold tunic robes.
I'm actually preaching on this in April.
Really?
If I see a pastor
Yeah.
with multiple houses, multiple cars, very expensive things like that, I don't trust them.
Yeah,
And I leave.
Yeah,
Like-
and if they don't have actual proof that they're doing
Yeah.
other business,
And
business
if their
behind it.
church is broke and poor, and they're with multiple houses, multiple cars, it's not adding up.
Yeah, well, there's a
So I'm
guy
just
in
gonna
New
leave,
York.
like-
remember the guy in New York, Lamar Whitehead? He's in jail, I think, right now. But
for like embezzlement and stuff.
yeah, but he did the same thing where he had all these multiple real estate properties. I mean, he drove a Rolls Royce and had a church of like 20 people.
I don't get how people, and as if you're any degree of smart, and this happens so many times. I've seen it a lot in African American communities. They'll be selling drugs and everything. They'll get their money. They'll buy a car. You think the people aren't watching? Like, they know you don't have a job, but you'll get a Porsche.
Mhm.
And your house is terrible looking. You'll get a Porsche. You'll park it outside in the front. Police go and by. They'll look at your Porsche automatically and be like, drug dealer. Because they're gonna look into you. They know you don't have a job. That just doesn't make any sense to me. Are you dumb or are you dumb?
Yeah,
Can
but
you be any dumber than that?
I think people though too, like, it's like you said, it's an image thing too. Like, we gotta know that, and we talk about it all the time. Like, we gotta know we're being, like you said, watched all the time. So if you're portraying yourself as this, and like you said, your church is dirt poor, like
Yeah.
people want to know.
And look, my church at that time was not the dirt poor.
Yes, well,
Church I
yes.
just
still,
the church
but-
I just
still.
left was like that.
But
where it's
like-
dirt poor.
Yeah.
Not growing. No members.
But it's
members
like-
are older on a fixed income.
Yeah.
And the pastor has 3 houses, 4 cars.
But it's
all right,
like,
well.
but it's like, I look at Craig Groeschel, who has the biggest church, well, probably like top 2 biggest church in the world, Life Church, right? They also are the creators of the Bible app, so he could be worth billions. Who knows?
That's what
right?
I say. Yeah.
But like when I look at his outfits, well, what does he wear? Plain shirt,
Plain.
jeans,
Yep.
plain shirt. I mean, he has a couple properties, but you don't see him flaunting it. Drives a regular. He probably drives a regular Ford truck.
And if you have a big church
You know what I
like
mean?
that, like,
but
go on, get your properties.
but-
invest in your family, invest in your future life. I mean,
But-
like, you don't need to be gone.
But here's the thing, though, Dallas. He doesn't flaunt it.
Yeah.
I don't know what the man owns
Yeah,
Yeah.
because that is not his
Yeah.
driving force. And I think a lot of the power trips that a lot of pastors have. The question is, what is your driving force?
Yeah.
A lot of people just want power over
yeah.
people.
And I don't think that you can't be successful as a pastor or as a leader in a church. I think we put too much emphasis on that. Like,
Yeah.
but I do agree with you that people take it too far, where there is. I think that there needs to be honor for pastors, because you have a lot of people now that don't have respect for pastors.
1,000%.
And to me, it's we actually went the opposite. We went from where we had reverence for pastors,
But we overdid it. Yeah.
but we overdid it to now we got no reverence
Yeah.
for some pastors. Now there's certain churches, like you said, that are extreme, and that's just the way they do it. Like, but we have to be in the middle ground. We got to have enough reverence to understand that these people are called out by God; they're anointed. So you got to have reverence and respect, just like you should have reverence and respect for God.
Sometimes you
But-
got to question that anointing.
But
sometimes,
but
depending on
at the same
pastor.
time, you can't go too far, because at the end of the day, like I said, the Bible does say, hey, you got to respect His anointed. You got to respect the people that are over you in leadership. He literally says, people that are over you in leadership, you need to respect them and follow their leadership.
It also says to text. It also says to test a vision, to test a prophet. It talks about how you test a leader, kind of. So how do you think that, like, because obviously it was different back then. How do you think you would test that now?
How do you test a prophet and you
Test a leader, test a vision. How do you do those things?
Well, I would say that the testing should be in the process of joining a church. You should be praying it out. You should be asking your pastor questions or the pastor questions. You should be talking to people around the church. You know what I mean? Filling out like opinions, listening to teachings, and all of that stuff. You know what I mean? And I taught this at
So you think in order to test those things, you have to know certain things.
yeah.
So what if you're like a new Christian, kind of like, I guess you could say kind of ignorant to certain things? How would you Because you could be just being fed lies and you wouldn't know.
Yeah, I also think that's used for mentors that aren't just in the church that you're trying to join. You know, bring a mature Christian with you that can discern, you know, like some of these things, and they can point things out to you, you know.
So are you saying for somebody that is trying to come to a church, like they feel like they visited a church and now they want to know if this is their church because of the leadership, or what are you like? What's your
No, that's what he's saying. Like someone wants to join a church, but they're a new Christian, but they don't necessarily know what to look for.
Yeah.
But that's what community's for, you know. Like you could find a mature Christian that I think they shouldn't be a part of this because they're going to be biased. You know what I'm
I
saying?
see so many people.
But
I'll just say it. I see so many, like, especially in certain communities, like, they'll become Christians, and a lot of them just flock to seats. Because that's, like, you know, they have a big entertainment factor, you know, they have a big church, they have big, you know, there's a lot of things to do there, you know, and it's not exactly a bad thing. I think churches should be a place where, you know, you want to go, and, you know, kind of like that. But, like,
I see what you're saying.
at the same time, you know,
but
it's
not necessarily the church itself, but the style of church.
Yeah.
The style of church.
Because
yeah.
because it is the same thing where like we have like big churches, like, you know, like what's a big church?
Journey.
Yeah, we're like they're baptizing hundreds of people, you know, a year.
And I think you as a church got to understand what church you are, because for me personally, I know a lot of people that go to the Journey because they go there and they go there because they are new to Christianity, or they haven't even accepted Christianity yet. They get saved there. So you can start out in a church because you're new, right?
Yeah, there are different kinds.
Yeah, and then you can move on to us, like, who is like a middle/teaching church, to where we take you to that next. This is how I see us as First Baptist. We take you to that next level to you actually start to get real theology and grow in your faith and become more solid in your faith.
I think there are different kinds of preachers. Some preachers are more like, come get saved, heed the call, kind of, and other preachers they're more teachers than preachers. Or it's kind of like
every church has their role. You know what I mean? So like an example would be like, I think the next level from us is maybe like Pastor Mace, because because Pastor Mace is like a biblical scholar.
Yeah,
you know what I'm saying? So like
I agree.
Each church has their role that they play, and a lot of people will look at the roles that they play, and because it's not the role that they like, they call them a false teacher. But like Verdict, like Elevation Church, like I know so many people that have gotten saved through his church, but a lot of people don't stay there because they want more, you know, and that's just the way it is for some churches, you know what I mean? And in my opinion, as long as the gospel is being preached in context, you know, and people are getting saved, who am I to really like?
So what is your whole thing with? So do you have anything? So do you agree then with prosperity churches? So do you think people should go to like these prosperity churches, you know, become saved, blah blah blah, and then leave? If somebody's telling me something that makes me feel good, I'm not going to leave and stop them from telling me things that make me feel good. I'm just going to stay there. So why would I leave? You know?
So I do not agree with prosperity churches, but that is more so because they're giving you promises of God, or they're lying that you're going to get this and that, and it's not really possible. You know what I mean? And there's levels of that, right? So like there's somewhere like I don't necessarily think. See, I don't think Furtick is a prosperity preacher. What I'm not the biggest. My critique on Furtick's teaching is more so that a lot of his preaching is self. Like the pastor of Elevation Church, like his preaching to me is just more man centered and focused. You know what I'm saying? Versus where like you know me, bro. Like when I preach, I'm preaching like I'm not always focusing on you. You know what I mean? And I think there has to be I think there needs to be better preaching, because like if all your preaching is just talking about someone in their life, like what's the point of preaching the Bible?
People are different places,
and that's
so it
why
doesn't always apply to.
And that's why I think that
that's
style
why I think
is good for the new Christian.
Yep.
But like when you get to that middle ground, okay, I know what I got to do. Now teach me the Bible. You know what I mean? And that's where my teaching is. That's where I'm kind of at in my teaching phase, and I'm trying to learn how to balance those things out. And I think that for pastors, it should be their job to know how to do all styles of those teaching.
100%.
I don't. Like, as I said, I'm not mad at the fact that some churches do that, but I think every pastor should know how to teach
from the beginning to the middle to the
they should be able to teach to someone that doesn't know Christ, in the same breath teach to someone that's in the center ground, at the same ground teach to someone that is very.
So are you a preacher or a teacher? Are you a preacher or a teacher?
You're asking me?
Yeah. What would you see yourself as?
I would say I'm both.
What about you?
Same. I probably lean more towards teaching, but I can preach. I mean, and I'm not being, whatever.
I would say Leroy.
I'm more of a teacher,
I would say
but-
Leroy is a teacher.
Yeah.
That's what I would say. I think because my like Leroy, like you are a shepherd. Like
100%.
you
I agree with
you walk with people, and if like if there's anybody that got saved, like I would throw them your way because you have the best way of getting them on the path and teaching them. I mean, look at Timmy, bro, and like all of these other people. So
Yeah,
but
I agree. I'm definitely more of a teacher than I am a preacher, but I can preach too. It's just like I feel like I know I'm in my zone when I'm individually teaching people or teaching people in a group. Like, man, that's why Wolfpack is kind of successful because I can spend time with these men and walk with them as they're going through this journey to get stronger in their faith and become more mature in Christ. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But I mean, from the stage, it's just like we both have done that to where we can do it. It's not really we can't do it or we
Yeah.
don't do it. It's just
yeah, I have a personal gift though for public speaking, I mean, and that's always been my purpose. So I would say I'm probably a better preacher than teacher. I mean, because like I think I could get people on the path to a lot of places, but I am an acquired taste of personality. Like, and you know me, like I'm not really changing my personality for other people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that builds very strong teams, but I also lose a lot of people.
I
in
think
the
that's
process.
why teaching in youth group has been good for me, because I like on the surface I'm a very intellectual person. If you're not gonna like, I'm willing to have those deep conversations with you. I'm willing to like dig deep into those different topics that you normally don't want to talk about. But having to simplify and like really condense what I think into for teens who aren't all that smart all the time.
Yep.
Will always or don't know everything, or just don't know what they're doing sometimes. Having to condense what I think has helped me to like really solidify what I truly believe, and I think that's been very helpful. So I think a lot of pastors, the ones who start off teaching to younger people, it's easier to learn from them because they know how to then they know how to teach to young people. They also know how to teach to adults. I think knowing how to teach to different age groups and knowing how to teach to different walks of people, the pastors who they've only ever talked to suburban people, they've only ever talked to like wealthy, well-to-do people. And then you have the pastors who have talked to, the wealthy, well-to-do suburban people, but have also preached to, the inner city crowds, people
Yep.
who are more
Yeah.
impoverished. Like,
Yep.
having that balance.
Yeah, I
being able
mean,
to speak to both is
Upward
key.
taught me a lot because I had to deal with kids. I had to deal with parents.
Yeah.
I had to deal with, dads that were upset. I had to deal with crowds. So I agree. I think once you learn how to deal with different people, you can kind of find out that you can teach different ways or preach different ways or whatever. And it's from learning that, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So
I mean, and there is an art to teaching. You know what I mean? And not every pastor is a good preacher. And that's the hard pill that a lot of people have to swallow. Is like a lot of pastors aren't good at preaching. You know what I'm saying? And I mean, even what I taught you about speaking to teenagers, like when you were speaking to a younger crowd, you got to fire off the hip. I told you, you have to come out swinging a blaze.
Yep.
Because you have to be able to capture, and you have to be able to capture them with a bunch of blaze, and then you bring in the theology in the Bible that kind of grounds the wild points that you're making. But when I'm preaching to adults, I can sweat and nerd out. What you see, like I teach way deeper, but. Yeah, but
I
a lot of
that's why,
people
like,
aren't. But a lot of people aren't. But a lot of people don't have the mental capacity to teach that way, which is why we are in kind of a conundrum now where we don't have a lot of good preachers, or we have a lot of good communicators, not a lot of good preachers. Communicating and preaching is two different things.
Yep. Yeah. And I think you got to learn the different styles of preaching because I've preached 3 different ways here already. And actually to this time when I preach in April, this is going to be a different style than what I usually preach to a certain extent. You know what I mean? So, and I think I think you learn that. Like not everybody preaches the same way and you have to know how to preach. Like Ron even preaches different ways every time. Like sometimes he'll preach because he taught us different ways how to preach too. Like he'll his main thing is to start with a story and then have a middle and then have an end and then maybe a story to finish it. You know what I mean? That's how he actually trained us how to preach.
And I hate stories.
Right. And Stevie don't like stories. You know what I mean? So most of the time when I preach, I start with a story. You know what I mean? Do a middle, and then do an end, and then finish with the story.
And that's what me and Stevie differ too. So
right.
if we've had to sit down and have a conversation.
But there's times when you got to just you just got to either preach from the Bible straight from the Bible without having any stories or anything like that, or you know what I mean, whatever the case may be, because sometimes you preach differently depending on what you're preaching on. Mm-hmm. So there's been times when I've taught from the stage where I've taught about the emptying your gallons and all that, and actually doing a teaching rather than a preaching. And it depends on what you're trying to articulate when you're on that stage. You know what I mean? So you can preach differently, different styles. Not everybody preaches the same. So
yeah, it's different for sure. It's different. So yeah, we got off topic again.
Yeah, sorry.
It's good. It's a podcast. It's a podcast. We're made to talk about everything, and then I want to talk about the last part of the abuse of pastors, which we said we kind of talked about the emotional abuse, but I also think that pastors can abuse people with bad teaching. Mm-hmm. And it brings me back to I was really thinking about slavery not too long ago and thinking these people really took the scriptures out of context. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? And started this whole movement based off of the scriptures that they held to. And one of the things that a new Christian needs to understand is biblical literacy. Biblical literacy is one of the most important things that Christians need to have. They have to understand that the Bible is written in a bunch of different forms of writing, and you are a writer, so you understand this. But it's written in a bunch of different forms, and when you can understand that, it really helps with the context of understanding the Bible. And that's probably the thing that makes me the most angry, is when I'm talking to a Christian and they're taking the Bible out of context. Like I was talking to this guy, newly saved. He's using Revelation verses to try to justify something. I'm like, dude, context, brother, context.
Yeah,
that's the end of the world, my guy. And you can't use a verse that is. I think it was, what was it? It had to be like Revelation chapter 20 verse 5 or something, or verses 21 verse 2. Where basically God is talking about the holy city, Jerusalem, and he's using this verse to say that I'm gonna tell you what he said. He basically said that the Palestine war, that basically when that Jerusalem is going to get destroyed and then New Jerusalem coming. I'm like, bro, you are just tripping. like New Jerusalem is in the order of the end of the world. We are not at the end of the world right now, But it's because of the lack of just literacy.
And that's one book I would say for new Christians, just don't read quite yet.
Yeah.
Oh no! Read with somebody. You know what I mean?
Yeah, or just
read
don't
with
read
somebody.
Because so many they'll read Revelations and they'll just come up with all these crack theories.
Yeah,
they think they'll know when the world's gonna end,
or even get a study Bible.
I see the signs whoa, all right. I think you need to calm down.
Yeah, or even get a study Bible. I love study Bibles. You know what I'm saying? Because they're actually because they give you historical context of what's going on.
Yeah, 100%.
So
I think literacy is, like you said, biblical literacy is important because people have their own theories and their own. I mean, just think about it. We look at most of us look at the Bible and we're like, okay, so where can we find ourselves in this story or this book? You know what I mean? So we automatically put ourselves in there, and it's a history book first. So we already have a bias to a certain extent. Now we got to figure out what it's really saying versus what we think it's saying because of our bias to the context in the book. You know what I mean? So I agree with you. Literacy matters.
Exactly. So, all right, we're going to end this podcast episode here, man. We hope you guys had a great time joining us, talking about just new followers and some of the crutches that they deal with. We'll see what the topic will be next week, though. Maybe, you know what, we're gonna have Dallas choose the topic for next week, and we'll see what he pops with. But we hope you guys have a great week and weekend, and peace out.